Hello and welcome to Talking Data, an exclusive collaboration between Boom Live and CVoter, as we look at a pre-budget poll asking the Aam Aadmi what indeed does he or she expect from this budget, but asking some very hard questions. Questions about inflation, questions about quality of life, questions about expenditure and how whether that has gone up in the last year or not, and importantly, has the BJP NDA government or the Modi government delivered on the economic front? What is the sense that people are giving to us a few days ahead of the union budget, and therefore what should the union budget be responding to when it comes to the pulse of the people, which is what this nationwide poll tries to address? So let's go over some of the quick ones, but before we do that, Yashwant Deshmukh, who joins us. Yashwant, tell us, there are some interesting things that are emerging from this. Some are a little bit of a surprise, though maybe on the positive side, but some may not be so much of a surprise.
Yeah, certainly some things are surprising, but at the same time, there are aspirational values. There are, every year we are adding to the middle class, as we call it. And that's a big thing, that the demography of India is changing. And as all we know that demographically speaking, there is no such definition of middle class. People generally tend to take that anybody and everybody who is not in the BPL is a middle class. Right. If that is the definition, then that definition needs to be checked. But largely speaking, Indian middle class is buffering up. It's increasing by the day. 20 years back, it used to be hardly 3%. Right now, even the rough estimates are roughly about 30%, and that middle class is not urban at all, or by all means. I mean, we have a substantial middle class even with the rural background as well. So all in all, this buffering of middle class, as this is increasing, so are the expectations, so are the purchasing power and the parity and other stuffs like that. And so we are looking at altogether a new way of how India looks at the budget, what it expects from the budget, what it expects its lifestyle or the quality of life to be, how it has been rating the quality of life in the last few years, and how and where exactly this middle class and the other people in India look for their quality of life to be in the coming year.
Right. Okay. So we've got economist Madan Sabnavis also joining us. Before we do that, before we go to Madan, let's pick up the two first points, that the questions that we asked, the poll asked, and the responses that came. So first question, in your view, after Narendra Modi became Prime Minister of India, what happened to inflation? Has it been checked and prices gone down? Has it been unchecked, prices gone up? Nothing has changed and prices remain the same. So there you see 48%, almost 49% feel that inflation has been checked and prices have gone down. Of course, there is empirical data to this effect thanks to commodity and energy prices going down, but this is also reflecting quite evidently in the way people are perceiving where prices are. Interestingly, nothing has changed and prices remain the same is at 33%, which is the next highest sort of response segment. The next question that we asked is, in the last 1 year, did the price rise have an adverse effect on your quality of life? The answer to this, 38% feel that it has affected their quality of life. That is, prices have risen over the last 1 year and they have had an impact on the quality of life. Now, this is something that rings continuously through this survey as we ask different questions, but all asking roughly the same, all trying to arrive at the same conclusion about what kind of impact has inflation had on your lives, and more importantly, has it affected your expenditure? So this is the broad first deck of finding. Madan, how do you read this?
See, what we have seen is that the inflation number has statistically come down, but this is more because of fortuitous conditions and not really because of certain definite steps which have been taken by the government to bring down prices. Like, supplies have increased for specific commodities like tomatoes and onions, which sort of brought down the consumer price index, which is getting reflected in more acceptable inflation numbers. Now, the reason as to why people are not feeling too comfortable about it is because we should look at inflation over what's happened cumulatively over the last 3 years. If I'm really talking of 10% inflation in the last 2 years, and in the current year, probably somewhere around 5 or 6%, we've really seen that the consuming power has come down on account of higher inflation. And that's a major reason why we don't see households spending money. And this also gets reflected when you look at the demand for consumer goods and what's happening in the index of industrial production, where consumer goods have been showing a negative growth rate continuously for the last couple of years. So definitely inflation has come down, and this is because of good luck, I would say. and people are not feeling better off because you actually know that your consuming power hasn't gone up because even your incomes have not increased at a commensurate level.
Right. Okay. So let's look at the next deck of questions. The next deck of questions asked, in the last 1 year, has the overall quality of life for the common man or you, has it improved, remained the same, or deteriorated? Right. So the answers are 39% actually said it's improved. Right, while people are saying at one level that the price rise has had an adverse impact on the quality of their life, they are also saying that the overall quality of life has improved. The second question in the same deck, we said, do you expect that in the next 1 year will the quality of life improve further? And there perhaps you can see how the last 4 or 5 months may have had an impact thanks to the factors that Madan was just talking about. The question was, do you expect that in the next 1 year the quality of life for you will improve? The answer was 61%, as you can see on the table there, said that quality of life will improve. This is dramatic. Well, only 8% or 9% roughly said it will remain the same, and about 16% said it will deteriorate. Yashwant, how do you read this?
Well, I read this as a double-edged sword. This is extremely high level of expectation that the quality of life will go better. A lot has to do with a little bit of inflation getting checked in. On the previous question of the inflation getting checked, also I totally agree with our other colleagues that that inflation had largely to do with the international oil prices and whatsoever the sectoral things that were directly connected with the crude oil prices coming down had a slight advantage or the slight change in the inflation coming down. But other than that, talking about other micro perspectives, there is a lot to be done as far as the inflation is concerned, and that concern is also added with the optimism at large that people want to see economy picture, economic goals, they have better job opportunities, better growth opportunities, better pay scales, better income. And of course, the expenditure going down as the inflation getting checked in so that they have more money to save or more money to spend. So all in all, this is a hyper way of getting excited about the future, which is good and which is bad. Good in a way that it also shows that the honeymoon period of Narendra Modi government is still continuing. People still have that kind of expectation. Bad in a way, this kind of extremely high level of unrealistic expectation can also lead to a lot of heartburn when the expectations don't get fulfilled, a lot of bad mouthing when the long-term growth plans do not actually deliver instantly. This is something which in medical terms I say a surgery versus the homeopathic treatment. Those who are
Right.
looking for a quick fix and a surgery, and when you are going ahead with a homeopathic treatment, well, the treatment might be good, but it may or may not yield immediate results.
Right.
So this is a double-edged sword.
Right. So, Madan, how do you see the optimism that lies ahead? I mean, do you agree with Yashwant? It's like a double-edged sword. And also, I mean, if you look at it from a more economic point of view, what does this really indicate?
No, actually, we're looking at quality of life. I think, are we really referring only to economic parameters? I guess they're looking only at economic parameters. In which case, I think the credit really should go to the government because it has inspired a lot of confidence in the household that we really think that things are going to change. And the overall sentiment also has definitely improved going by how the stock indices have been going in the upward direction, notwithstanding the fact that we don't get the same reflection at the ground level. But I think what the government has done is really sort of assure the people that good things are going to happen and that we are already on the recovery path, even though it's going to take time before it really manifests itself in terms of economic numbers. And I think that's the reason why people are optimistic about things changing for the positive. Because I think the dark days are behind us. And even though the pace of change is something which we could actually debate, whether it's going to happen immediately or whether it's going to take another couple of years, my own sense is that probably from 16, 17, things are going to change more drastically than what we're seeing right now. But definitely the next year does appear to be slightly better than this year. And that's the reason why there is a lot of hope and optimism as far as households are concerned.
So, just to remind our viewers, this is over 1900 sample survey conducted across India. So, let's look at the next deck of questions that we asked. This is where it gets a little interesting. How much, according to you, do you need per month as income to sustain an average quality of life for four? right? So that's the question. The answer has actually been split between the BPL, below poverty line, low income group, middle income group and high income group, as you can see on the chart. So the interesting thing is that the middle income group is saying it needs about 20,000 rupees a month to lead an average quality of life. On the other extreme, you have the high income group, which is coming in at 40,000 rupees a month roughly, or twice as much to lead a normal and average life. Annually, for the poor, I mean the below poverty line works out to about 2,43,000, and for the high income group it works out to 4,80,000. And then you have the middle class, which is about 35,000, closer to the high income group per month, which is adding up to about 4,16,000. Yashwant, I'm going to come to you in a second. Madan, how do these figures look to you? You know, about average requirement need for an average good quality of life for a lower income group, 20,000, high income group, 40,000.
So actually, Govind, it all depends upon the way in which we define a certain quality of life. Because just saying we have the stock difference between 20,000 and 40,000, which clearly means that if you're lower down the echelon, your demands would be more limited. You would not really be expecting a lot from life, a lot from your income, a lot from your savings, and therefore you would tend to be having fewer aspirations than those in the middle and higher segments. And so therefore, I think the numbers are fairly reasonable and something which looks fair enough, say, for a family of four to run a fairly satisfactory life. But the whole challenge really is how do we actually improve on these particular numbers, and whether at all we have actually cut down on certain of our comforts or luxuries on account of the recent inflation, which has eroded into our incomes. I think that doesn't really come out from these numbers which you have put in front of us.
Right, and yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what are the shifts that have happened within this number that people are? Yashwant, can you walk us through some more details on how these numbers were extracted?
Well, certainly. I mean, it's been 10 years that we have been tracking this particular question and this particular number. And yes, there are always questions about the subjective aspect of quality of life. And we all know there has been in the global economy, there has been a consistent debate of growth beyond GDP and the subjectivity of quality of life at large. And there have been a lot of research going on everywhere. Certainly, there is a subjectivity as far as the quality of life is concerned. There is a subjectivity in one's own assessment of what is decent and what is not. One man's luxury is another person's necessity, and one person's necessity is another person's luxury. But having said that, the way in scientific community this question is designed is it's very much designed from the line of World Wellbeing Index survey about a subjective element of quality of life, number one. And this regards as the average subjective element. We are very clear about wording of the question, where we are not asking for a comfortable or an extraordinary or something like basic. We are talking about average. This average again is a very subjective, but that's the way it is. What we need to understand though is that the important part of this number is that it is automatically inflation adjusted, because the people who are working day-to-day life, people who are going to buy vegetables and the routine affairs, when they say that today we feel that we need this much of money to manage my family, that is automatically inflation adjusted, and which has nothing to do with what the official government numbers are there. This is why this number makes it pretty interesting, you know, and well, one may argue that the number which is given by BPL family might be looking at the luxury kind of setup, which according to their parameter, while the high income group might be talking about the bare minimum number that they need for having an average quality of life. This is why we need to focus more on the middle income group, which looks at the average of the averages and looking at a decent middle class quality of life, the way me or you or any other middle class person would have described it. Having said that, this looks pretty interesting data, number one. What actually struck me most was that the personal taxation slab, which the government had proposed last year in the interim budget, about 2.5 lakh rupees, that is hardly covering the money which is expected by even the BPL families, that they feel that this much they need to live an average quality of life. So certainly that number is not at all appealing or not at all enthusiastic for the middle class. What is interesting to watch out, that the personal taxation slabs are not even good enough to give a give a full put up the expectation of a BPL family, leave aside a middle class family.
Right, and the
So
middle class,
that is where I would like to stress more.
right, yeah, and basically what this means is finally, and which comes to the next question, which I'm going to come to in a moment, is that the tax slab should ideally be somewhere above, going by the demands sort of unstated in this response, is that it should be above the 4 lakh the level. So the next question obviously is therefore, should this much income be made tax free? So and the answer, 84% say yes, and only 13% say no. So the idea is that we should have a minimum tax base going by this of at least 3.2 to 3.5 lakhs, if not higher, as the minimum from where you start collecting taxes or you start taxing people, and leave it alone till then. So let's see how the government responds on that. Madan, do you have any take on that?
Absolutely. I think this makes a lot of sense that the tax exemption limit needs to be linked a lot with the inflation numbers. Because even if you look at the government sector, where normally your salaries are linked with the CPI inflation number, I think we should have a similar thing even when we are reckoning the tax exemption limit. So if we're starting off with something like 2 lakhs and we're having a 10% inflation every year, if we keep doing it on a regular basis, I think there will be a sense of security which individual households would derive. So definitely there is a very strong case for adjusting these exemption limits and accordingly also moving the tax slabs on the upper side of this.
So there you are. This is what the Aam Aadmi is saying when it comes to tax slabs, at least as derived from what we've the questions we've asked. Okay, so last set of questions and the last deck really. The first one is, in the last 1 year, your personal income remained the same and expenditure went up, income went down, expenditure went up. Income increased but expenditure stood constant, income went down and expenditure remained the same. Well, there you can see the answers. About 32% say that income remained the same while expenditure went up, which of course ties in with the earlier point about in the last 1 year, did the price rise have an adverse impact or bad impact on the quality of life? So where if you recall, 38% has said that yes, the price rise did affect their lives. So 31% say that incomes have not changed and while their expenditures have risen. The next question we asked is, how do you compare your current daily expenses to that of last year? 46% say that current expenses have become difficult to manage. Possibly there's also an understated need being mentioned for an additional income or raise in income, but the fact is that current expenses have become difficult to manage. And before we come to the last question of what is the feeling on the Modi government, Yashwant, do you want to compare these, quickly go over these two questions?
Well, certainly these two questions actually tell you the macro perspective as far as the macro and economic management is concerned. Some pointers are there, inflation is going down, but half of the Indians clearly saying that they are still uncomfortable. They are finding the life difficult to manage within the money that they have and the expenditures they have. Number one. Number two, almost every third Indian is saying that it's going for the worse. Actually, it's not even getting better. So certainly a lot of catch up to do at the policy level. What we are trying to do with these surveys is we must try to understand. Budget is, we generally talk about all the time about the macro and microeconomic perspective from the economist point of view, from the numbers perspective, about the policy makers and the policies driven at large. And the numbers in our survey which we are picking up from the common man are the numbers which really matter when the person goes into the market to buy the routine stuff, buy the food, and it's a matter of the kitchen, which the housewives find it difficult to run their kitchen for their kids. So we have to figure out the way. We have to sync these two micro elements of the economics and the macro elements of the economics, where they really merge and they see that what the policymakers are trying to say and is it reflecting on the ground. As far as I can say from these numbers, the numbers are not really reflecting on the ground. People are still uncomfortable. People are still looking forward to Achhe Din. Their children haven't really arrived for them so far. What they are looking forward to, that if the things cannot be managed overnight, at least their taxation part can be brought a bit low so that they have more money at their end to handle the economic situation.
And I think we have the sweet spot. We have the sweet spot here. So just to remind our viewers, this is a sample of 1,942 randomly selected respondents across all demographics and across all states of the Union of India. Okay, last question. Has the Modi-led government, the BJP NDA government, delivered on the economic front so far? Right. So that's the big question. Okay, there you are. The answer is actually much better than expected, 36%. This of course is somewhat incongruous with what industry is either saying or not saying, or some of industry is saying and a lot of industry is not saying, at least publicly. Just as expected, 28%, worse than expected, 29%. So I repeat the question, has the Modi-led government delivered on the economic front so far? 36% are saying it's better than expected, 29% are saying it's worse than expected, 28% are saying just as expected, and don't know, can't say 6.1%. So let me get Madan's last word in this. Madan, how do you see, if you can sort of, are you able to interpret this differently?
No, actually, it depends upon what exactly expectations were from the new government. Now, personally, if I were to talk for myself, I would say that there's a limited amount which a government can do to turn around an economy. Because if it was so easy for governments to turn around economies, I think there would be no suffering in Japan, no suffering in the US following the financial crisis. So this said, I would say that what I was really expecting from the government was a lot of cleanup operations, cleaning up the administrative processes, improving the sentiment in the economy, and doing its best to make sure that the fiscal is kept in order. And I think to that extent, they have probably delivered on their promises of what they can do. But in terms of the actual economic numbers, I think the thrust has to come from the private sector. And the government is doing whatever little bit it could do in order to bring about this revival. So on the whole, I would tend to think that the government has delivered on most of its promises.
The optimistic note, Madan. And last word, Yashwant. Now, if you were to look back over the last 10 years and the polls that you've done, does anything stand out this year, or are you seeing a similar consistent trend?
There are some trends which are consistent, like the household required income is going up every year. This is largely because of the inflation as well. This is largely because of their expectations as well. Well, one thing is which stands out is the highest level of expectation that we have figured out in the last 10 odd years. People were not this enthusiastic or not this expectation, have a high level of expectation. The way I look at it, that the final question is that it's a one-third split, approximately one-third saying ayes for this government on the economic policy so far, one-third saying no's, and one-third somewhere in between, which the government can actually turn towards its favor, or it may go anti depending on how this government performs. Having said that, we all know that these are the common men, we the people on the ground, who may not be economists, but who actually have to run their own personal microeconomy in their domestic front, and they are the voters. It's not the industrialist or mere you journalist or the economist who are going to go out and vote and decide the fate of this government's future 4 years down the line when they go back to ask for the mandate. And we have seen just a month back that the economic priorities of the people are more into their day-to-day lives, and even the promises of free electricity and free water can deal a big blow, as far as Aam Aadmi Party did so in Delhi, we have recently seen. So somewhere between the policy and the implementation, it might be an economic policy which is looking more at the broadly industrial level, but the Modi government has to keep in mind it's the common people on the ground, it's the Aam Aadmi, which has eventually to judge based on their own experience and expectation of their day-to-day life, and they will be going out to vote for this government or not when the election as and when it comes. So there is a lot to do, a lot to catch up as far as the economics is concerned for the Modi government.
Right, Yashwant. Thank you so much for that. Very interesting survey. 1,942 randomly selected respondents across all states of India, asking the fundamental question about how has life changed, have prices affected you, what is the sense of the future, and finally, how much do you actually spend? So very interesting answers there. Most importantly, most people surveyed here are still optimistic about the future, actually very optimistic. They would obviously like to earn a little more money, and they would obviously like to see more of their money not being taxed, or less of their income being taxed, and we've obviously given you the figures already. Thank you very much for watching Talking Data. It's been fun talking to both Yashwant and Madan. We're going to be back very shortly. Bye-bye.